If a tragedy such as a homicide or a suicide were to happen at a house, the seller of that house, if that house were sold later on, the seller would not be obligated to disclose that information to prospective buyers. In fact, the seller generally has no obligation to disclose anything to a prospective buyer. The seller simply cannot misrepresent information or cannot conceal information. In fact, it's very, very unlikely that the seller's agent would know about that information, or that the buyer's agent would know, or even the seller's attorney. If anybody's going to find out about it, it's going to be the buyer's attorney, because the buyer's attorney is going to do a title search, and that's going to require the lawyer to look at the legal ownership of the home for the past 50 years. So if there's been a death of one of the homeowners, the buyer's attorney is going to have to look at that probate file, and there's going to be some description in that file of how the person died. So it's then up to the buyer's attorney whether he wants to speak with the buyer about the matter or not. A couple of years ago, I had a closing. My client was purchasing a house from an estate. I looked at the estate file, and first thing I saw on the death certificate was that the owner hanged herself and that she was left hanging in the house for days. Now the deal immediately fell apart, not over that, but over a financing issue. So I didn't have the conversation with my buyer. And then, strangely enough, like a month later, I had a new buyer, completely unrelated to the first one, ask me to represent them in buying this house. So I said, look, before you sign any of this paperwork, I want you to be aware of one thing. There was a suicide. A woman killed herself in the house, and her body was there for days. And surprisingly, the buyer didn't care. He bought the house anyway. He had no problem with it. Okay, I would never be able to purchase a house like that. So if you're buying a house and you have questions, the person to ask is probably your attorney. And if you're buying from an estate, it may not be a bad idea to get a copy of the death certificate so you can make sure that no tragedy has happened there and there's nothing to worry about.